Hey, Don, it's good to see you.
I got a good story about that. It's important to create studies in the Oh, no, right across the road from the church. I've sitting there across the road, and it's what they call it, so
Good evening, everyone. I'd like to welcome you to the monthly meeting of the Farmville Prince Edward Historical Society. It is Tuesday, May the 16th, 2006, 7 o'clock at the Farmville train station. I'd like to welcome everyone here. I see we have some guests. Always welcome to come anytime you like. We do like to recognize one new member that we have tonight. Dr. Marvin Scott is a new member. Everyone knows him. Make sure everyone gets a ticket that Julian's given out at the very end of the program. We started something last month where we're doing a drawing for a door prize. And tonight we have a copy of Bradshaw's History of Prince Edward County. So we're going to donate that at the draw for that at the end of the program. Tonight we'll be having Dr. Ray Gaskins speaking on the cemeteries of Prince Edward County. We'll do that in just a moment. Next month we have May the 20th, Sharon Carney, the director of the Prince Edward Economic Development, will be here speaking on the Prince Edward participation in the 400th anniversary of Jamestown and the Appomattox, Jamestown's Appomattox project together. That's about all I have for tonight. We're going to go ahead and get started with our program. We're looking forward to that. And I'm going to let Kay Whitfield, who is our Vice President, introduce Dr. Gaskins.
Well, that's a loss for words, isn't it? Our speaker tonight, as Dale told you, is Dr. Ray Gaskins. He has a PhD in statistics. I was good about it that time. From Virginia Tech. He's retired professor from Hampton City College and is professor emeritus of mathematics and computer science at Hampton City. He was the former director of computing at Hampton City. I thought this was interesting. He wrote the training stimulator for the North Anna nuclear power plant, which is now used worldwide for training nuclear power plant operators. Also, he was recognized in the year 2000 for one of the best research papers in the field of statistics. I'm sorry. One of the best 100 research papers in that field in the last 100 years. Now that must be amazing to be able to write a research paper like that. Since he has retired, he has two major projects. One of them, and I find this really interesting, he has created a list of 1,000 most worthwhile to watch movies. And he has sold that list to Virginia Tech, and they use it to help them buy movies for the college. Now, I think that's amazing. And his other interest is identifying and recording the information that he finds in many cemeteries in Prince Edward and the surrounding counties. So, Dr. Gaskins, thank you so much for coming tonight.
I gave the list to Virginia Tech, and they're using it as a buying guide, so they are spending money. They didn't give it to me. I've got a handout. I had to actually cut the list down because
the talk is on cemeteries of Prince Edward County. So all the surrounding counties I cut off this list. So these are just the ones that I have been to in Farmville and Prince Edward County. Well, there's 32 there, that should be enough. And what I have done on that list is to identify the oldest stone, and that means the oldest stone that's got a date on it. It doesn't mean the oldest rock. There may be a rock that's been there a lot longer, but I can't tell. So that's the oldest date that I could record. And before anybody notices it, the oldest date that I got listed for Westview is 1845. There is an older date in there, but it wasn't original with Westview. It was moved there, so I didn't think it was quite fair. There's a grave in there marked 1797, but it's 50 years older than anything else in Westview, and it was moved there from Randolph Plantation, I believe. So to be fair, I just say the oldest stone that was actually painted there in Westview was 1845. These names, Bev Davis helped me especially with family cemeteries. He had the cheek that I don't have to pull up in somebody's driveway and get up and go and knock on the door and say, "Do you have a cemetery that I could look at?" So he's been very helpful in finding cemeteries. And when I tell him where one is located, he'll go and he'll beat the bushes in the neighborhood until he finds it. Steve Bloom actually did the calculations for the first thing that I'm going to talk about, which is aligning a tombstone eastward using the sun at sunrise in Prince Edward County. And I'll pass this around. This is a diagram. But basically, when I call Steve Bloom, he is a physicist and he's the astronomy guy on campus. I said, here's what I want to know. I want to know what angle the sun makes from north to south at sunrise on a, say, a tombstone that's facing east. I want to know the maximum that you could get from winter to summer. And I told him I think it's about 45 degrees. He said, oh no, it's not that large. But I don't know where it is, but I can simulate it. And he simulated it. He wound up with 57 degrees, which is even more than 45. But basically what it is, if you were to take a pole at sunrise, and you were to measure the angle that the sun makes at, say, 7 o'clock in the morning, you would get, in the wintertime, the sun's going to be way over here if this is the south. And the sun's not going to get much further than about right here. In the summer, in fact, I think it's coming up in another month, June 21st. And what I'm talking about is the shadow that that pole's going to cast. It's going to spin an angle of 57 degrees, maximum, from December 21st to January 21st. And the reason that's important is because as a statistician, I like numbers. As a mathematician, I love puzzles. So I was puzzled when I first started this. It seemed to me that all the stones seemed to be facing in generally the same direction. So I started measuring, taking a compass. And I was amazed. I mean, the first one I measured was College Church. Due east. Bingo, they got it exactly right. So they must have had a compass when they buried the first person. And once the first person, generally everybody else lines up without it. But then I found some that were the stone, when it's facing due east, I mean, if this is due east, then the stone is going to be like this. The writing is going to be on the eastward side so that sunrise, it lights up the writing on the stone. Essentially, it's going to, and the person would normally be buried feet to the east, head to the west. And actually, those instructions, if you go over to Kirker's office and look in the Westview Cemetery book, you'll see those instructions on page 1. Tells the people to do the burying. Feet to the east, head to the west. And that's what I'm talking about. The west view is dead on. It's absolutely due east, but there's some, as you can see by the handout, the first handout that I did, that there are some that are a little bit to the south, some a little bit to the north. And there are a couple of crazy ones. Trinity Memorial has no rhyme or reason. They just stick you in any place that can get you. So they're a north, south, east, west. But I was really shocked that one church is actually south facing. I just did that one this week. They only have 3. I didn't know they had a cemetery. They had 3 people buried there. I know the story. I don't know whether I should tell it public. I know how it happened. Because the first person to die was the minister. He was in charge, and he would have gotten it right. Somebody else had been buried. He would have gotten it right. But they had to bury him, and no one really knew what they were doing, so he wound up facing south. And that's the extreme. Everybody else is pretty much in this corridor right here. Slightly northeast to maybe twice as far to the southeast, but most of them are dead on, almost as if they had a compass. So I was impressed. Now, what I have put together so far is this. Now, all the counties that touch on Prince Edward are in here. I've done Cumberland, and I've done Charlotte, and basically it was wherever there were people buried that I was interested in, I went there. And I kept going back, and I said, man, I might as well copy it all down, because gas is getting pretty expensive. So I started copying it all down. The longest it took me to do a cemetery was 10 days. That was over at Prospect, about 800 graves, and they were hard to read. The next thing I want to talk about is readability. What do you do? How do you help yourself? Who's done readability? This is an example of a stone with heavy moss or something on it, anyway you can't read it. And how to get that off without damaging the stone. The tools that I use, it's very important not to damage the stone. I mean, somebody would want to get a portable drill with a little wire wheel, and I thought, oh no. Not on my watch, I didn't want to take responsibility for it. So the things that I have used that are pictured in that picture, this brush, and this is very handy because it can clip right in your pocket. You just carry it around. If it falls out, you'll be able to find it. Right. This scrub buddy, they're $1 for a pack of 6 at Dollar Tree. And one of them will last you generally a whole day. So this is a week's worth, if you have to use it. And for the really heavy stuff like you're looking at being passed around now, this is just an ordinary ice scraper for windshield. But since it's plastic, it's not going to do much damage to the stone. So hit the heavy stuff with this, then scrub the residue off with this, then wipe it down with this. It takes the stuff out of the cracks, and it is readable, as you can see right there. The best time to go in a cemetery where you'll have to do the least amount of scraping is between 11 o'clock in the morning and 1 o'clock. And the reason is because the angle of the sun, when it comes up, I actually have a problem with it. The sun is on the horizon. It's straight on the stone, it'll blind you. Now, I've never been there real early in the morning, but I know I've been there this late in the afternoon, like 5 o'clock, and I can't read the hard-to-read stones. Now, the easy-to-read stones you can still read. Sun goes around. Some of the stones are west-facing. I don't know why. Prospect has the largest percentage of west-facing stone I've ever seen in any cemetery. I don't know why, but all of them have some. College Church has some west facing stone, where the stone, instead of facing the east, is turned completely around, and I don't know why they did it. But as it rises, the angle it makes highlights the shadows on the stone, and some stones that would be impossible to read on a cloudy day, or even if you came real early in the morning. Come clear as a bell when the sun gets up here about 11 o'clock. So 11 to 1, 11 to 12, and a little bit after for most of the stones, and then the few that are facing the other direction you can get after 12 o'clock. If you are unlucky, as I quite often, I get there at 11 o'clock and I get to a stone at about 1:30. It's hard to read and the sun's now moved on the other side. This is a secret that I'm sharing with you for the first time. If you take this is $1 at Dollar Tree. And the sun is now moved to the other side. The sun has now moved to the other side. Here's the sun. 11 o'clock, I was doing good. And all I got later, and the sun moved to the other side. Now I can't see, I can't read. It's hard to read sun. But what I can do, see what I can do? Mm-hmm. Now you can put it at almost any angle you want, and you can play with it, especially on a bright sunny day. I mean, the sun over here is great, but you can take it, you can angle this thing, and you can pull it over at an angle, and you can read everything on it. It's wonderful, and especially the stuff is down there at ground level or a little bit below, you have to dig it out. You can fashion the sunlight right down there on it. So this is $1. I've already broken one, and so far I haven't had any bad luck. I guess that's the big danger. Sometimes you have to kneel down. These are free. Football game. Get you one of these, carry it on. You can use it when you have to kneel down to get a closer look at a stone. It really helps a lot, especially if the ground is down. Now I'm going to talk about a sore subject, cemetery maintenance. I'm probably going to step on some toes here. Westview does a wonderful job cutting the grass, and I also did Oddfellows recently, and I was amazed at how well that was maintained. And I said, it looks to me like the same people are cutting both of them. Now I don't know if that's true, but I've heard that it is true. So essentially the town is maintaining it. Is that true? It looks like
pays a portion of it. Town pays a portion of it.
right. Okay. The problem is, although they do a wonderful job, Liberty Christian Church does a wonderful job and that kind of maintenance. Cut the grass, cut the ground, all that stuff. What Westview doesn't do is the other half of the maintenance. They don't impact the stones. They don't touch the stones. They don't run the equipment into the stones, and that's wonderful. Some cemeteries do. You can tell there's a lot of damage from equipment. The people who cut Westview and Oddfellows don't do that. But they don't do any, if a stone looks like it's going to fall over, they let it. They don't try to prop it up. Liberty does. I went to Liberty and I was amazed. All the stones were just straight up and down. I said, how did y'all manage that? He said, we came out here and with a pressure washer and cleaned everything. And then a contractor came by and gave us some ideas on how to re-level the stones, so we re-leveled all of them. And that you can catch, and that's what I want to pass around now. If you catch it in time, stones like this, you can save them. If you don't, this is what happens. That's preventative maintenance, but it doesn't appear that anybody's doing it. At one time, it appears that somebody did do that at Westview. And not to just pick on Westview, Prospect's got the same problem. A lot of cemeteries have the same problem. Okay, the next topic is going to step on even more toes, and that's cemetery law. One of the things fairly early on was, you know, what right should I have to go on people's property looking for family cemeteries? So I actually looked up the law and read the law, and a lawyer told me once I figured out what it said that I was wrong, but it turns out he was wrong. There is no requirement to keep records. So a cemetery does not have to keep records. Some places do, some places don't. Mercy Seat, for example, doesn't keep any records at all. They don't have any idea who's buried out there, where they're buried. And every time somebody wants to be buried, you have to go out there with push rods to make sure there's nobody there. But they're not unique in that. A lot of other cemeteries have to do the same thing. The only law really that's enforceable on the books is non-desecration. The dead have a right to peace, and you're not to desecrate their grave. However, nobody complains, nothing will be done. If somebody complains, something will be done. Now, I've got an example of somebody who complains. This is wonderful. I was looking for this, and I found it. This is Thomas Driscoll. Found out his neighbor, and Thomas lives so far he can't see. I mean, he could not see the damage. He heard about it after it was done. The Howard brothers decided they were tired of plowing around the cemetery, so they bulldozed it. Thomas found out. Thomas took him to court. It was open and shut. There's a law that says you can't desecrate. So the judge made the Howard brothers pay for a monument. Now the real tragedy, I'll pass this around, the real tragedy, and to show you how weak a case Thomas Driscoll had, he didn't even know who was buried there. He just knew it was some Driscolls buried there. And he thought some Daniels, and that's what the monument reads. Had he known, and had he had a list of everybody buried there, the judge would have made the guy pay to put them all on that monument. So he went in with saying, I've got some relatives there, and that's all it's required. The judge, it cost Howard Brothers about $5,000 for that monument. Most of the rights reside with the landowner. So if you've got a cemetery on your property, you don't have to let anybody on to see it unless there is some provision for it in the deed. And I found an example of that. Wiley Overton said his Overton family cemetery is on Bradshaw Road. And when they sold the property, they had written in the deed a set aside for a 1-acre cemetery with a 20-foot access. So finally they said, you can go on over there. And go on up to it. Said, but if you're afraid, I'll go with you sometime. So I went over there, and you can't see it from the road. You got to walk around behind this other guy's barns and stuff. Find it. So I said, well, maybe I ought to come back with Wyatt Lee before I tackle that one. But that is an example of where you can put it in the deed, and then there's no question about it. But if there's nothing in the deed, then the owner has the right to refuse access. And he doesn't have to maintain it. He doesn't have to do anything. The only person who can do anything about it is his neighbor. And that's written in the law. It says if the cemetery on one property impacts the property next door, then the neighbor next door can sue. But that's about it. There's virtually no regulation for cemeteries, so a new law was enacted in July 1 of 2000 for profit cemeteries. They excluded almost everybody. Out of the state estimates there are 5,000 cemeteries. I think there are 10,000, but they said 5,000. When they got through with their exclusions, they excluded family cemeteries from this new law, church cemeteries, municipal cemeteries, all kinds of cemeteries. They wound up at 126 that are regulated by this new cemetery board. starting in July of 2000. And they have to be licensed, they have to pay a $600 license fee and all that stuff. If you want to hear about it, go out to Trinity, because it's the only one in Prince Edward that's licensed. Go out there and ask her. She would be glad to fill you in. She talks about paying that $600. All right, here is an example of what I consider desecration. I don't think they intended it to be, but it got out of hand where nobody complained. This is Buffalo Church. And that's the evidence. And as best I can put the story together, I've heard all kinds of stories that they brought a bulldozer in. I don't think they did that. The cemetery committee got together and decided the grass would get too hard to cut, so they had to do something. And so they decided to pull up all the footstones, pull up all of the concrete curbs. They got carried away and they wound up pulling up a lot of headstones. Now, how can I prove that? Well, there's a pile. And I found one headstone. See, I didn't want to go out there and dig through this stuff, so I just looked at what was on top, and there was one headstone. Most of them were footstones. So I went to another source. Does everybody know about the 1959 tombstone survey? Wow, okay, that's a well-kept secret. In 1959, an organization with a real long name decided they were going to go out and record all tombstones that were 1890 or older. The reason for that was that after 1890, all deaths had to be reported to the local authorities and then forwarded to the state. Before that, there was no record. So they decided to do that. Ruby Red was one of the people involved, and she enlisted the help of the Boy Scouts. So I found out where this was. It's in the courthouse. And I said, now, where is it? Well, it's an old box on top of the shelf. Nobody much looks at it. Well, I pulled it down and went through it. And I found 81, there's one card on one stone on one card. I found 81 cards for College Church. And I was delighted. I said, this is wonderful, because the people read these tombstones 50 years ago when they were a lot easier to read than they are now. And I had some in College Church that were very difficult to read, and I wanted to check them against what they had. And furthermore, I thought there were a lot of people buried in College Church that didn't have headstones, and I thought maybe they had headstones at one time and they disappeared. Students took them or something. Well, I found 81 stones that they reported for College Church. I wrote them all down and went over there, and I compared those 81 and found all 81 of them were still there. Not a single one was missing. The students didn't steal any of them in 50 years. So I compared what they had written on their card to what was actually on the stone, and it was hard to read, and I went with them because they read it 50 years ago. But they made, out of 81 stones, they made 41 mistakes. And by mistake, I mean at least one thing was wrong. One date was wrong, the name was misspelled, something like that. If there was any error at all, I called that one error for that card. And there were 41 like that. So, as a statistician, I think that's reprehensible. I mean, I think it's worthless. It's worse than worthless, because it's somebody's going to write that down and think they got it right and go on and not look any further. And so, a 50% error rate is just intolerable. So, what I did, then I said, you know, I could use this to go over to Buffalo and check all the rumors I heard. They had, for Buffalo, they had 29 recorded. Now, they didn't get them all. They missed some that were earlier than 1890. I found some in College Church that they just simply overlooked. And I think, if it's in the Boy Scouts up there to do it, you know, they're going to through it as quickly as they can, and they just missed some. So there were at least 29 stones, 18, 19 or older at Buffalo. So I went to Buffalo. 17 of them were missing. So that's my smoking gun. And that's why I then went in the woods looking for what I've got pictures of it. And found a pile of footstones which contained some headstones, and then I also found all the concrete footing and 2 piles in the woods. So obviously they weren't intending to do anything wrong, or they would have hid the evidence. The evidence is still there, and nobody complained, so nothing was done. And it's impossible now to match the headstone with the grave because nobody has seen records. So if you were to go through the pile and pick up, if you could find all 17 of them, you wouldn't know where to put them. You could just put them back willy-nilly. But that's a shame. Okay, after that, I decided to go to the treasurer's office and look through the book that she has on Westview. And I don't like the index, so I just went page by page, and the book is like this, so it took half the day, page by page. But by doing it, came across a page that had a court order stuff in the back. I read that with great interest because there were 5 names on it, people that I was looking for, and I'd never been able to find their grave. And I knew that they were originally buried in Parent Cemetery on 2nd Street. This may be the most interesting story to you and the one that you might want to do something about. Even though it was done legally, the first example, Thomas Driscoll, that was not legal. The second story really wasn't legal, what Buffalo did. But this third story might even be the worst nightmare for you guys, and it was legally done. What happened is somebody wanted to develop a lot on 2nd Street. There was a family cemetery on it. It just happened to be the Venable family cemetery.
Didn't you tell me that was the 2nd Avenue?
Well, I told you 2nd Avenue, but I was wrong. It's 2nd Street,
Okay.
way on the other side, right. I did say 2nd Avenue.
The rescue squad.
Yeah, it's probably the rescue squad. Well, somebody wanted to develop it, and there was a cemetery, and they had to get it out of the way, so they got a court order. Court order required them to advertise it. There aren't any Venables around here now, that I know of. They didn't see the ad. If there was an ad, I looked in the Farmville Herald, and I can't find it. So I'm assuming that they did put an ad in the paper. So nobody stepped forward, and so they exhumed 5 graves, and they wrote down the names of the people. And 2 of them were really important people who I was looking for. And you can see it. I'll pass this around. All that's there now is a temporary marker. And on that temporary marker, you may not be able to read it. It's so small. It says William Venable. When I saw this in the treasurer's office, I looked and I said, well, look, all 5 of these people were put in separate graves, and they were. Their names were written in separate graves in the book. But then the number on the grave was changed to 2, 2, 2, 2, 2. And I said, my God, they're all in grave 2 on this plot. And that's exactly right. And I asked the treasurer then, I said, maybe the developer did this because it was expensive. How much are your graves? And she said, oh, if you're a resident of Farmville, only $100. So I said, well, wow. But that shouldn't have been a factor. So all 5 of these people were exhumed, put in a box, mixed up, put in one grave in Westview, temporary marker, saying William Venable. Now, who was William Venable? William Lewis Venable, 1800 graduate of Hampton, Sydney. He was a judge in town. He was a businessman in town. I believe he was the owner of Haymarket, the plantation. He was on the board of trustees at Hampton City College. He was the son of Nathaniel Venable. Now, if this guy isn't protected, I mean, what chance do we have? Then Nathaniel Benjamin Venable was an 1832 graduate of Hampton, Sydney. He went to Pennsylvania Medical School, got his MD, came back, was a doctor, married Catherine Venable, who, by the way, is buried in a separate grave in Westview. I mean, if they had known, if they had asked anybody, they could have taken him and put him right on top of her grave. That would have been, and then changed the stone or something to reflect that. So, those were two important venerables. There were 4 other venerables in this cemetery, but they weren't on the list. There was one name that stands out that I'll never forget, and it's what really drew my attention. It's the name Florida Proctor. Florida Proctor was the name of a 20-month-old infant. I don't know how he got there, but he was buried in this family cemetery, and his name is on the list. He's one of the 5 people that was exhumed and moved to Westview. He's not a venerable. Maybe he was just passing through town or something, and they let the infant be buried there. But that's really, I mean, when I saw Florida Proctor, I mean, that is such an unusual name that I knew I had something. Now, it was legally done as far as I know. My only beef is there should be a marker with all 5 names on it of the people who were exhumed and moved over there. My records show there were 4 venerables and Florida Proctor. The court order shows 2 venerables, Florida Proctor, and 2 other people I never heard of. I'm not sure where they got their information, but at least 3 of the names are in common between 3 people I thought were there and 3 people who were actually moved. That brings us to College Church Cemetery number 3. In 1888, March of 1888, I'll pass this around. In March of 1888, President McElwain of Hampton City College wrote a letter to the trustees of College Church requesting a 60-foot right-of-way to the church grounds. The board replied, "We'll do it, but you've got to give us a suitable lot at a reasonable distance from the church for an alternative cemetery." And the deal was made. And so I went looking for it, because nobody at College Church knew anything about it. So I went out looking for a cemetery over somewhere on Hampton City property that was abandoned. And I found 2. One of them has got to be the right one. The first place I went, though, was the courthouse, looking for a deed from Hampton City to College Church for that 1 acre. Couldn't find it. But it wasn't a wasted trip because, oh, by the way, I took a lawyer with me. Ben Pavis is a retired lawyer. He's good at this stuff, and so he helped me look for this. So we couldn't find it. What we did find was the deed to Mercy Seat Church, which they have never seen. I took a copy of it and translated it, typed it, gave it to them. So, "Have you ever seen this before?" And they said, "No." They didn't even know what it was. When I told them, they said, "We've always wondered about this. We've never seen it. We don't have a copy of it. Could you mind if we took this and framed it, put it up on the wall?" I said, "Fine." So that was very gratifying to have at least done that good. It wasn't a wasted trip to the courthouse. So this was a gentleman's agreement. I thought the first location I found, periwinkle, dug up graves, plants that looked like they were in a cemetery, and a funeral vase. I mean, a funeral vase laying, you see it in the picture. I found an expert, took them there, and they said this was definitely a cemetery. But I don't think it was College Church Cemetery number 3, because Paul Giles heard about what I was doing. He said, "Look, Harry Baldwin has been telling me for 30 years that his grandfather was buried over there behind the field house. And I'm going to take you to show you where he says he was buried." He dug him up at some point and moved him back to College Church. So I went over there and Paul showed me the fence posts are still there that surrounded this cemetery. Field houses encroached on it, the playing fields have encroached on it, but probably 2/3, maybe 70% of the thing is still there. I actually did a sort of an engineering drawing. This is a statistician and mathematician. I went and measured the distance between all the fence posts that are still there and tried to extrapolate the actual size of this thing, and it's 208 by 208. It's exactly 1 acre. It matches the description in President Eggleston's 1941 History of College Church. I read that thing. It's in a rare book room. It's an unpublished manuscript. It's hard to slog through it, but I did, and I found 3 mentions of this third cemetery. Now, Harry told me that 42 years after his grandmother was buried, he dug him out, put him in a box that he made, and took him over and buried him inside College Church. I said, Harry, why did you do that? And Harry couldn't remember, but Paul Giles seems to think something happened to trigger it. Something was going on over there. They were going to come in and encroach on the cemetery, and Harry told me that eventually there would probably be practice fields there, and he didn't want them practicing on top of his granddaddy. So he dug him up, and I said, Harry, how did you know it was your granddaddy? He said, my granddaddy only had 1 arm, and his skeleton only had 1 arm. And he said, besides that, he had a gold tie pin, or stick pin. And he said, that was still there, and I kept that. He said he didn't rebury that. I'm going to have a wood expert come in and look at these fence posts because they're 110 years old. They've got to be something more sturdy than even cedar that lasted this long. The only ones that are down are the ones that were knocked over by something, or the encroachment occurred here when the field house and the road went in and took a swipe out of it. I found 1 corner post, and from that I was able to extrapolate everything else mathematically. Without that, I could never have come to the conclusion it was exactly 1 acre, which fits the description, and it's on the side of a hill. The only thing that's missing is periwinkle, and that's why I didn't find it on my own. I don't know. It's abandoned. I don't know who owns it now, whether College Church has any claim or whether the college. The next thing, I guess, would be probably, I think historically the most significant thing that I've done are the above ground vault. This is a stone one at Buffalo. They did not knock it down. They left it. It's sitting out there by itself. There isn't a grave within 50 feet of it, or 100 feet of it. And that's why I knew something was wrong. There's one just like it over at Jamestown, Old Jamestown Church. And there's a story attached to it. I won't go into that now. I'll pass this one around. Here are 2 above ground vaults, 1 brick, 1 cement at College Church. Here's Governor Randolph. It's a 1797 date, but he wasn't originally buried at Westview. He was buried at Randolph Plantation and moved to Westview for some reason. I'm not sure why. But he is definitely the oldest, but he predates everybody else by almost 50 years. And then there's a modern vault. There are only 3 or 4, there are 4 of these in the whole of Prince Edward County. There's 2 at Westview, 1 at Spring Creek, and 1 at Liberty. And this, at first I thought this was horrible, what a monstrosity, and I wasn't going to take a picture of it and exhibit it. But after I went there a few times, it grew on me, and I looked at it real carefully. It's an engineering marvel. It's at least 10 tons of concrete. And then I found out that he actually constructed this on the first anniversary of his wife's death as a tribute to her, of course, and then he died later and he's buried beside her. If it were cleaned up with a pressure washer, it would be a lot more attractive. All right, all that is to preface this. This is a historical find, and it's the one you might be interested in. This is the only all-brick tomb that doesn't use mortar that I've ever seen anywhere outside of Egypt. I mean, I've been to all the surrounding counties and looked at thousands of graves. There's nothing like this. This is Chantilly on Henderson Farm. This is the big trees in the field, the slope, and everything's perfect for a cemetery. Went there looking and asked the guy, and he says, yes, I've got a cemetery. He thought this was a pile of bricks. I look at it and say, hey, that's not a pile of bricks, that's a brick tomb. And I've got a diagram on the back that proves that it is because I've found all the fieldstone markers around it, the rows of other graves. The significance of that is that it's slightly, the way I make it now, somebody needs to go there and take it apart and clean it up and put it back together because it's marauding cows have done a number on it. And it's 150 years old. Most tombs made with mortar and brick don't last that long. But this one is still intact. Bricks are strewn everywhere. They're strewn around within 50 feet. But slightly, just slightly, 10 feet long at the bottom, 9 at the top, so just so that the bricks don't fall over like this, they're leaning inward. I tried to think of a reason. Can anybody think of a reason why I might have done that? He died in 1861 in January. That's a clue.
Ground was frozen and couldn't dig it.
Yes, absolutely. The ground was frozen and they couldn't dig it. So they took his box, his iron box in those days, took it out there, put it on the frozen ground, and stacked the bricks, thinking they would come back in the spring and bury them. But what happened in the spring?
War.
That, to me, is the best explanation. But it is still a remarkable find. There's nothing like it. I mean, and if you've been to City Cemetery, Lynchburg, they've got 2 brick tombs made with mortar, and they brag about them. That's the highlight of the tour. Hey, I don't have anything like this. We should start our own tour. I think I have hit the highlights, so now would be a good place to stop and take questions.
Right. All cemeteries and the Christian tradition for centuries have been supposed to face due east because of the resurrection morning when the Lord's supposed to come again in the east. At Thornrow Cemetery, great cemetery up here in Stanton, all of the tombstones face due east except one. It's the tombstone of Jedediah Hotchkiss, who was the map maker for Stonewall Jackson, and he got a special vote from, his wife got a special vote from the city council that his tombstone could face south. So all the others face east at Stanton.
Well, now, when you say east, are they due east or are they?
Due east, due
How
east.
did they determine that?
Well, I guess it was a compass, like you said, but that's why they always face east.
Right, well, my point is that they don't always, some of them, the one I did today, I've finished all the big cemeteries in Prince Edward. I'm not going to do Westview because Westview has records. You can call the treasurer's office, he can tell you whether somebody's buried there. Same with Trinity. But everybody else, I've done. I've done the big ones, the small ones. I'm still working on some family ones that I haven't gotten to yet. But the real big ones, the ones that take a day, 2 days, a week, are all done. The one out, so I went back today, the one that I wanted to do in Cumberland. I've been working ever since we set this up. I've been working to finish Prince Edward County, so I could finish it by the night, and I did. So today I went over to Cumberland and did Antioch. Antioch is 45 degrees to the south. I was shocked. Most Methodist churches get it pretty close, within 5 degrees, and I call that due east. But they way off. Now, how do you explain that?
Just did an eyeball and cross-eyed.
Well, I think if you were to look back at this, the first person that died probably died here,
Right.
and that would probably, this is probably about 45 and 12,
Right.
so that may account for it, because not all the people have compasses. Yes.
What's the total number of graves that you found in all of these cemeteries?
Thousands. I haven't actually tallied them all up because it's the way. Let me tell you something about the way I do it. The way I do it is different from anybody that I've seen do it. I don't list them one right after the other across rows. I try to keep the family unit intact. 600. The other big one, the Meharon United Methodist, is about 500. Pisgah is about 600. So you put it all together, and it's probably 5,000.
Aren't there a lot of people missing?
Oh yeah, absolutely. The thing that really bothered me is one of the things I wanted to show you is I went over to VDOT and got a map, and they got all the churches listed, and that's where all the big graveyards are, except for Westview and a few like that. And I went to every single one. It took 800 miles. And I wrote them down whether they had a cemetery or not, whether it was large or small and whatever. And first thing I noticed is there weren't enough black cemeteries. And I asked some people about that, and they don't know. But now I found that there are a couple of black cemeteries that in Prospect that I have been to that aren't in the church, that are just sort of in the woods, big ones. And that might account for it. There are a lot of big cemeteries in the woods that don't have stones as you can read, just have rocks. And I don't know what to do about those except to get the GPS coordinate for it. And if somebody can tell you the name of it or whatever, but if nobody can tell you anything about it, then it's really not very interesting to me, except to just record the coordinates for it. Oh yes, question.
I want to know what story you heard on that above ground tomb at Buffalo Church.
I didn't hear any.
I think you meant the one at Jamestown.
Jamestown.
No, we're talking about
Buffalo Church, old Buffalo Church.
I haven't heard the story about that one.
I thought you said that you.
And he was referring to the one at Jamestown.
Right, I heard one about the one at Jamestown.
Huh? I beg your
The
pardon?
one at old Jamestown.
Oh, I'm sorry. Okay.
Yes.
Well, you go tell him the story about this.
I
They
know
know
the
that.
story, but I'll have to tell you later. Because I can't remember the name, but some of my family.
Oh, okay.
Well, they went to South America, they ran away from home, went to South America and got some dreadful disease. And sealed them up in a copper casket or something. They think.
It's
That's
supposed to
right.
be a copper casket at the bottom of that place.
Well, why are the trees going on? And why are they letting that happen? I mean, that is dreadful. By the way, future projects. I mentioned one of those. There is an unexplored Civil War cemetery on the Buffalo, Douglas Church Road near Allen Farm Road. People just bought the property and they were told by the family that owned it for 5 generations, we've never let anybody on here to explore this. But now that you own it, you do whatever you want. So the first thing you do is they call me, I look at it, and it's big. It could be as many as 300 graves. They think it's Civil War, that's what the people who owned it thought. I don't know, but I'm going to probably explore that one. There aren't any headstones with writing. There are lots of fieldstone markers. I saw one grave that had a headstone and a footstone fieldstone marker.
Where did you say that is?
It's on, if you go up Allen Farm Road all the way to Douglas Church Road and take a left, it's less than a quarter of a mile, and it's a road off to the right. It's the road into the farm. It's about a 90-acre farm. The Halls own it now. Yes.
Run across any interesting inscriptions?
Oh, yes. I didn't write down the typical ones that you see, rest in peace and all that stuff. But if one was really good, I wrote it down. One is, what we keep in our memories is ours unchanged forever. I only wrote down 6 really good ones. One was sleep on, brother, and take that rest. We loved you, but God loved you best. And then there's one that I've seen 5 times. And it's even a copy of it over at Oddfellows. If tears could build a stairway and memories a lane, I'd walk right up to heaven and bring you back again. That, people who've never seen that think it's wonderful. But I've seen it now 5 times. First time I saw it, I wrote it down because I'd never seen it before. But now I've seen it 5 times and about 5,000 graves. So that's 1 in 1,000 still. And there was one that I wrote down. Oh, the longest one I've ever seen is over at Trinity Park. It's 22 lines. I wrote it all down, I don't put it on the computer yet. And it must have cost a fortune, because they don't allow the little teeny things, so this person has a big slab with this whole thing written out, and so it's obviously something they wrote. It's not something I've ever seen before. Yeah,
Ray, I'm familiar with the east-west orientation of the graves,
yeah.
but I've also heard that slaves were buried north to south. Have you ever run into that? Of course, I'm sure you probably always just see rocks.
That's not true.
Yeah.
There's a slave graveyard on that place. I think it's on a place that we call it the mission place.
Yeah, I would say that's not true. I've got something I can pass around on small black family cemeteries. And one of the dates, 1701, and that was east-west. It's on,
They were buried above the plant.
it's a Thornton Family Cemetery over here on 73 Road.
But you would find it easy because they're buried.
Yes.
Approximately how many are buried at the old Jamestown Cemetery?
I don't know. I asked General Wilson because, see, I've been over there with him, and I only saw one stone. That was his, I think his grandfather. Or it might have been his mother's fault. I'm not sure. It's dated 1912. It probably, would that be his grandfather? I'm not sure, but.
I think it's both of them. Yeah.
It's a dual
Yeah.
mark.
Oh, yeah, that's right. It's both of them. And it's right beside that stone crypt. That's why I saw it. Otherwise, I didn't see anything. And now somebody told me that there were a lot of stones still standing over there. You just said the beach is bushy. But I asked the journal, he said they're not. That they've all fallen down and been covered over. So I'd love to go over there and dig them up and see what's on them.
There are lots of field stones just before you get to the foundation site of the old church.
Yes, I saw
That little rockway you saw there, the tomb area,
Little indentions, you see a lot of those there.
there's a lot of them there, field stones. That's right in the front area where the church stood.
Are y'all going to do anything with that?
Well, the town is working on it and the county is working on it in conjunction with the Jamestown of 2007 celebration for the 400th anniversary of that. So we have our own little Jamestown we can be proud of.
How about the Israel settlement? Did they have a separate cemetery?
I don't know. I haven't found it if they did.
You told us
I'm
about
sure they did. That there are cemeteries everywhere. I know one man says he had 4 on his property.
Starkey, did Israelville have a cemetery?
I thought you told us about the cemetery.
Oh, yeah. About 35 graves in front of.
Thank everyone for
And it had the names on some of the
Yeah.
stones. I looked at it because, and wrote it down because of this man wrote the scripture for Israel. And some of the white stones.
And where's the cemetery located?
Well, you know, we just told
We do
the
a
Thursday.
drawing before we dismiss where I was.
And Doug takes up.
Thank you, Ray.
Last 3 numbers are 038. 038. Somebody got it. 115038. Good. Right, Charles. Thank you for coming. Next month.